This video is for Apuntes, Comparativos, Superlativos, Igualdad. First of all, let's remember about thing 1 and thing 2. We're going to use them quite a bit as we're forming comparisons and statements of equality. Starting with comparativos, regular. We'll start with regular comparisons like greater than and less than. Here's your general formula for regular comparatives. Basically, it's más or menos plus the adjective plus k. Now, thing 1 will go before the más o menos, and thing 2 will go after the k. Let's look at some examples. My mom is prettier than your mom. So in Spanish, when we do prettier, we're going to split it into two words. We're going to have more, and then we're going to use our adjective for pretty. So mi mamá es más bonita que tu mamá. All right, another example. History is less interesting than algebra. So in this case, we have less, so we're going to use the menos. So our Spanish then would become La historia es menos interesante que el álgebra. I just want to clarify that with the comparisons, if you want to say that one thing is more something than another thing, you use más. If you want to say that that first thing is less something than another thing, you're going to use menos. One last thing about the regular comparisons. Notice that the adjective agrees with the first noun it describes. So if we go back to our first example, my mom is prettier than your mom, we needed to use bonita because that's what agreed with mi mamá, our first noun. Okay, now let's look at the irregular comparatives. These adjectives have irregular comparative forms. Bueno, good, and bien, well, both change to mejor, which means better, when we're making comparisons. Malo and mal, which both mean bad, change to peor, which means worse, when we're making comparisons. Viejo, which means old, changes to mayor, which is older, to make comparisons. The last irregular, joven, which means young, changes to menor to make the word younger in order to do comparisons. Let's do an example with an irregular comparison. French fries are better than vegetables. So better, remember, is one of our irregular words. Papas fritas son mejores que verduras. So if we look at this, it still follows a similar structure to what we had before. We're starting off with thing 1, papas fritas, and our verb son. But then rather than saying more good, we say better, mejores que. The K is still there like before. And then thing 2, verduras. Notice that in this example, rather than using mejor, we have mejores. And that's because papas fritas is plural. And remember, our adjective has to agree with the first noun that it describes. Time now to look at igualdad, or equality. To compare equal items in English, we use as. In Spanish, we use tan, adjective como, with thing 1 and thing 2 on either side of that. For example, Juana is as tall as Lupe. Juana es tan alta como Lupe. Notice the adjective alta agrees with the first noun it describes. Both are feminine. All right, superlativos. Superlatives. Superlatives are like the words that end in est, so like prettiest, funniest, most something. So the formula for superlative statements is thing 1, then you're going to use your article plus the noun plus either más o menos and then the adjective. Now by article we're talking about the word for the, so like el, la, los, or las. Let's do an example. Senora Pritchard is the funniest teacher. To put this in Spanish, we're going to follow our formula. Thing 1 being Senora Pritchard. La Senora Pritchard es la profesora más cómica. So our noun, la profesora, then más, and our adjective, cómica. Notice that our adjective agrees with the noun it describes. They're both feminine. To say the most in a group, we're going to use de. So let's look at an example of this. To say Senora Pritchard is the funniest teacher in the school. So now we're saying like the group, we're qualifying the funniest teacher of what? La señora Pritchard es la profesora más cómica de la escuela. So even though in English we use in Spanish we're going to use de. Now let's look at some irregular superlatives. As it turns out, the superlatives have the same four irregulars as the comparatives do. So now let's look at what those irregulars are. We've got the best, el mejor. Now on your paper this is also noted as la mejor, los mejores, or las mejores. I just didn't put it in the video to make it simpler. The worst, el peor. Again, this could be feminine or plural as well. The oldest, el mayor. And finally, the youngest, el menor. Again, oldest and youngest can become feminine or plural as needed. So let's do an example. The flan is the best food on the menu. Now I put food in parentheses because we can actually choose whether or not we want to include it with the irregulars. But for consistency and learning our pattern, we're going to put it in there for right now. And that's going to translate to el flan es la mejor comida del menú. And as you're looking at this, notice that we're using la mejor because it has to agree with comida, which is feminine. So we're using the la. Let's look at another example. Marcos is the youngest person in my family. So again, there will be situations where maybe the word person isn't included and we just said Marcos is the youngest in my family, but for right now we're going to practice it with it in there. And it would be Marcos es la persona menor de mi familia. If we were to omit the persona, it would read Marcos es la menor de mi familia. Marcos is the youngest in my family. Again, even though Marcos is a boy, because it's describing la persona, we're using la menor. Just a couple quick final thoughts about the word order with these irregulars. Mejor and peor go before the noun they're describing, as in la mejor comida. Mejor was before the noun comida. Mayor and menor go after the noun that they describe, as in Marcos es la persona menor. Menor came after the noun persona. Probably the main thing that's different with the superlatives versus the comparatives and the statements of equality is that you're only using thing one for superlatives. The comparisons and statements of equality, we had thing one is more something or is the same as thing two, whereas superlatives, it's thing one is the most of like everything. That's it for our notes. So I'm going to leave you with thing one and thing two and some practice exercises to do.